Towson, but too quickly for me here as we get into 2018. Luke Jones joins us now. And, Luke, I know I saw your calendar. It had practice Wednesday, practice Thursday, practice Friday, potential trip to New England next weekend for what would have been a Saturday night showdown there and the gunslinger of Flacco and Tom Brady. But, alas, that's not where we are right now. It's a completely different path. It happens very, very quickly. It's rude, it's abrupt, and it's happening all over the league. And as you know, being a Twitter dog yourself, every hour there's going to be a rumor and a link and a Josh McDaniels and a Jim Schwartz and a defensive coordinator here. This is the state of the league. This is the busiest 2 weeks in the league if you're involved in agenting or coaching.
It really is. I mean, you look at this and you look at really the first 3-4 days of free agency as some of the most hectic, crazy times on the NFL calendar. But going back to your point, it really is abrupt how this works. I mean, last year when the Ravens lost on Christmas Day, you knew the season was over. Yeah, they were going to go to Cincinnati and play a meaningless game. The Ravens looked like a team playing out the string in Week 17 last year, but you knew it was coming. The Orioles this past year, with such a bad September, you knew their season was coming to an end. So for this to happen in the way that it did on 4th and 12, and Andy Dalton hitting Tyler Croft or Tyler Boyd, Tyler Croft, the tight end, who did damage against the Ravens on Sunday, it really is difficult to process. But at the same time, it doesn't stop. John Harbaugh on Monday was meeting with players. I know, talking to team officials, there was a line out his door as far as him meeting with players. And that's not anything unique, by the way. He does that pretty much every year. They do their exit interviews, so to speak.
And, man, that thing happens quickly, too, now. I mean, you talk about him coming in and having to talk to us, after the game and meeting with the media, and, my God, it's all over with, and is my owner pissed, and am I getting fired tomorrow? Then it's 10 a.m., come on out, clean your bags out, let's get out of here and figure it out. I mean, I was thinking C.J. Mosley was probably at the Alabama game on Monday night, I'm thinking, the guys scatter kind of quickly, and there's no reason to hang around, and there's no game film to look at. We don't need to look at the drops in the first quarter or, the Kennedy, Weddle, whatever the hell mishmash that was on 4th and 12, or that time you didn't get to the quarter. There's no time for any of that. Now there's hold on to your hats. Defensive coordinator's out the back door. Owner might come down and fire the coach. General manager might be retiring. Assistant general manager's getting called by everybody in the league to interview. Somebody wants to talk to my coaches, right? I mean, Pagano's on line one. He needs a gig, right? I mean, this is a sloppy, weird week that no one has a script for in any way.
You're absolutely right, and that's where everyone's kind of looking over their shoulder. Everyone's checking their phone. It really is different in that way. I mean, you mentioned the players. For every Eric Weddle who was in the locker room on Monday and then went to work out and even told the media that much, there's probably 3 or 4 guys who aren't worried about working out for the next week or two, and that's their prerogative. That's their right after a long season. But it really does tend to scatter quickly for the coaches, for the front office. It's a very different animal right now. I think as more time passes, you assume John Harbaugh's safe, but we've also seen coaching changes in this league from guys, 4 or 5 days later, or even a couple weeks after the season ends. I mean, you never quite know until you hear officially from Steve Bisciotti and company. So we know Dean Pease is retired. I think the next immediate question from a coaching staff standpoint is what happens with Marty Morningwig. I know Joe Flacco was asked about him on Monday. He expects him to return, but we know Joe Flacco doesn't make that decision. So I will say Flacco had just come from a meeting with John Harbaugh, and you would think if Harbaugh had told him that Marty wasn't returning, then Joe wouldn't want to touch that question, but also can't assume that decision's even been made yet. So there are so many parts, there are so many layers to this. That's why you as you said at the beginning of the discussion, you're checking Twitter, you're checking your phone constantly, or you're waiting to see what could or won't happen over the next few days and really over the next couple weeks. So it's a really hectic time. It's a really unsettling time for this organization. As we talked about in a previous conversation, this is as low as it's gotten for the John Harbaugh era. I know they went 5-11 2 years ago, but that was such a strange season.
Well, all of this, I mean, how many times have you seen Harbaugh fired on Twitter or Facebook from some idiot, or heard it on the radio or whatever? But, this is the first time where you and I didn't even speak after it happened.
Yeah.
I mean, there was 8 minutes, after the play happened. And literally, I grabbed my stuff, and as I literally walked downstairs, I tweeted out, I'm not in the brain of Steve Bisciotti,
right,
but this is going to be a rough night of sleep for him, wondering, do I really have 5 or 6 more years with John? Do I really have 3 or 4 more years with Ozzie? Is Eric really the successor? Who should be running my offense? Is Joe Flacco going to win another championship here? Or are we at the point now where it's been 10 years, 11 years? I need my Andy Weidels and Joe Douglases of this era looking for my next quarterback. So, I might be looking for my next coach. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, I would think this is a very, very trying time, and we talk so much about Angelos and the Orioles, and we make fun of it because I don't know what else to do with it 25 years into this, but this other organization doesn't operate that way. You know what I mean? And certainly from having been through the president of the organization down, through all these owners' meetings, and now seeing this stadium look like a bomb went off all year long, where no one's going to the games, everybody's pissed off. I've written 18,000 words about it. This is a code red for the organization, or a code purple, or a deep lavender, or whatever you want to call it. And and more than anything, if I know this about Bisciotti, and it's so much different than the old coot that owns the baseball team, is he is going to go down to Palm Beach in Jupiter, and he is going to pray on it, think on it, make more notes about it, measure it, talk about it, volley it around, because that's just the dude he is. I mean, I know him, and I know how he brings the brain trust together every year, and the partnership, and how this works, and how Billick got thrown out of the partnership 10 years ago this week. Kind of hard to believe, right, Luke? 10 years ago it's been, right, on the Billick maneuvers, and I don't know that Bisciotti wants to do that again. And I think that's the toughest thing I've ever seen him do, was firing Brian, and he didn't even hire Brian. The rest of these guys he's gone to war with and, had a champagne-soaked night in New Orleans. These are tough times for Steve Bisciotti, taking cover after all that's happened this year, and the season ticket book's going out in 6 or 8 weeks. Just an unbelievably devastating loss for the organization.
It really is. I mean, this is a potentially franchise-altering loss. No matter what you do, whether you make changes or do you not make changes. And as much as you talk about the past success of this organization, nothing lasts forever. I mean, we can sit here and talk about any GM, any coach, any dynasty, and none of them last forever. Tom Brady will eventually retire. Bill Belichick will eventually retire, and the New England Patriots will be in that same boat. Now, they've had a ton of success for going on 2 decades now, but that everything has an expiration date at some point, and that's where Steve Bisciotti has to take a long look here. And the business element that you mentioned further complicates that. It's one thing if this happened and you were still drawing 70,000 fans in the seats every single game, but there's very, very clearly disenchantment. We can all debate the issues. It's not just one thing, it's multiple things, but that is an extra element, an extra variable that you throw into this decision-making process, because there's absolutely a sentiment, even for people who've continued to go and continued to watch, and people who aren't taking an issue with what happened in London as much as others. Even for those folks, you hear over and over that they feel that the product, the message has gotten stale. And that's not to say that they think everything's terrible and that the Ravens are a disgrace and the worst team in the league or anything like that.
But it's enough that 30,000 people had tickets that were $100 to $300 and didn't go sit in them the other day for a playoff game.
it's a fair enough point to mention that they're 40-40 since Super Bowl 47. They have one playoff win over the last 5 years.
But I hear the 40-40, and I hear that after a Super Bowl. And I'm not saying that your barometer shouldn't be 14-2 like it is in Philadelphia, as an example. But dude, 40-40 is a far cry from like the dregs of this league, and where the Jaguars and the Browns and the Texans and the Bengals and the whomevers have ever been. I just. And again, I wrote about this. If the bar of expectation is unless they're 12-4, I'm not going to the stadium. Boy, we're at a different level, and again, I always juxtaposition it against the baseball team and whatever the level of expectation there is going to be over the next 5 years. But I'm not saying 500's good, but I don't think it means like I don't want to support the team anymore, don't want to go to the games anymore, or don't want to go sit in the seats anymore. And I know that issue's is way more complicated than that, especially in our city with crime and weather and Monday night games and all the other, and the knee and all the other things that have gone into it. But I do really worry about this franchise, and that's why I've been writing about it the last couple of weeks, because I don't think, Luke, miraculously, they're going to kick off on September 12th against whomever, right? Pick any of those home games on the schedule, Steelers, Bengals, whoever, it doesn't matter, right? How many people are going to be in the stadium? Who's the quarterback going to be? Who's the coach going to be? Who's going to be on the defense? Who's going to be on the offense? And how is it going to be any different other than the weather? Than an expectation? How is it going to be any different 8 months from now than what it's been the last 3 months, where the brand has problems and the city has problems and the league has problems beyond Joe Flacco not moving the ball on first down,
Right. But going back to my point, 40-40 isn't justification to not go anymore. I think it's more so people point to 40-40 and say, has complacency set in? I mean, if you're just going to say that everything's fine and you're going to keep the status quo, which is what happened last year. Let's call a spade a spade.
Well, everything's not fine. They haven't made the playoffs in 3 years.
Right. And that's my point more so as far as if you're Steve Bisciotti and you look at this thing. I mean, we can all talk about the success this organization has had. They've had a ton. There's no question about that. Ozzie Newsome's a Hall of Fame general manager in addition to being a Hall of Fame tight end. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
You know, it's funny you would say that, because in the middle of the night when I was awake thinking about this, I could remember, because it's been 10 years on New Year's Eve, that Brian got fired. And I thought, 10 years of my life, that's incredible. And all I remember about that press conference that day was Bisciotti with tears in his eyes saying, I'm looking for a Hall of Fame coach. You know what I mean? And I don't know if John Harbaugh is or isn't a Hall of Fame coach, but I know he's going to get another gig and get 4 to 6 more years somewhere else if you threw him out the side door. And he might go and coach the Jets and win a Super Bowl, or he might go coach the Cardinals in Arizona. I don't know. I'm just saying, but John Harbaugh might be a Hall of Fame coach. I don't know. So you may have hired one, and now you're contemplating, am I going to fire one? Because wherever he goes, he'll be better the second time, because you probably like him better now than you did 10 years ago if you're Steve and if you're in the building, and institutionally everybody in the building has gotten used to his many, many, many quirks, right? Because that is part of the deal. And you would find that if you went into the Seattle building, you would find the culture of Pete Carroll as much as you would find the culture of Bill Belichick in Pittsburgh or Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. But you would also go into half the buildings in the league and there would be no culture, right? Because there ain't been anybody there for the last 24 months or 36 months. We've had a general manager there for 22 years. The Browns can't keep a general manager 22 months.
Yeah, that's fair. And that's what's difficult about this. And that's what was difficult about firing Brian Billick. In retrospect, was firing Brian Billick the right call? I think you'd have to say yes.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, the results spoke for themselves. But that didn't mean Brian Billick wasn't a heck of a coach here in Baltimore. There's a shelf life. There's an expiration date to everything. It got to a point where when Earl Weaver came back in the mid-'80s and you knew the Orioles weren't the team that they had been in the late 60s through the early 80s, well, the idea of him being the head coach or the manager anymore wasn't as appealing. So, everything comes to an end. What's difficult for Steve Bisciotti is figuring out if this is the end, if it's better to make changes now. And I'm not just talking specifically to John Harbaugh. I'm talking any change that you make. Is it better to do it now, Or is it better to continue to go down this road and 40-40 turns into 48-48 or 47? I mean, it's just.
I'm wondering what this press conference is going to look like, by the way. Luke, I'm going to take 1 minute here to tell everybody about King Discount Liquors. Lottery, beer, booze, the best prices in Baltimore. I hit 3 bottles of wine last week when I saw Paul King and picked up 2 6-packs for New Year's Eve. Get over to Rosedale, get my friends Paul King, read everybody over there. Give the King a ring, Johnny Bev. Go see him. It is 2018. Don't let your beer and liquor get stale. I'm out of tequila as well, so I got to get over there for that. Box Hill Pizzeria, you probably saw me up there having a big old tasty crab cake, and I brought back 5 bottles of the dressing because you never know when you're going to get back to Abingdon in the winter. They have the best crab cakes in Harford County. They can be shipped anywhere. You could bring them home, take them with you, and they even have fancy labels now on the dressing up there, that Greek salad dressing that we love so much. I almost say like it's the only dressing we eat. Box Hill Pizzeria, it is a crab cakeria up there in Harford County. Also, Freedmont Mortgage. Don't make a 30-year mistake by choosing the wrong lender. You need Freedmont Education Online and Freedmont Mortgage. See them at Freedmont.com. And, of course, Carl Delmont joins us here each and every week. You can find him out in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault talking about the Harrisburg Heat and some soccer and indoor soccer, the Heat and the Blast playing next week as well. Luke, go ahead, take the floor on this thing because I think I left off with, boy, this Bisciotti press conference is going to be a doozy now, isn't it, huh?
Yeah, it really is, and we don't know yet when State of the Ravens is going to take place. I mean, the first couple of days after the shocking loss, we still haven't heard anything official from John Harbaugh on his coaching staff beyond issuing a statement on the retirement of Dean Pease. I mean, I think there's so many layers to this. You start with Ozzie Newsome and Eric DaCosta, and whether they're both returning, whether Ozzie Newsome retires is, as we've just wondered aloud. I mean, that's going to happen at some point. Is now the time? If now's not the time, what does that mean for Eric DaCosta? Does he continue to wait? Or does he look at this thing and say, hey, I don't know, if this is the best situation anymore, if he's going to continue to wait around. Then you go to John Harbaugh. You go to his staff. I mean, we know they're going to have a new defensive coordinator. I think the big question: what happens with Marty Morningwig? Do they retain him again? What does Greg Roman and his potential candidacy as an offensive coordinator elsewhere? What does that mean?
Well, there's a lot of chairs moving because there's 10 jobs open, right? I mean,
that's the thing. They've really liked what Greg Roman has done with the running game, but because you have coaching openings elsewhere, because he's been an offensive coordinator elsewhere, you would think he would at least get a few phone calls, right? At least get an opportunity to interview as an offensive coordinator elsewhere. If you don't want to lose him, do you promote him to offensive coordinator, say goodbye to Marty Morningwig, and then maybe at that point, because Greg Roman is known for the running game and the big criticism of him in previous stops was his passing game not being as good, maybe you go out and hire a quarterback guru, quarterback's coach, someone to kind of oversee the passing game a little bit.
Like a Gary Kubiak type.
Yeah, kind of the reverse of what they did this past year with Roman overseeing the running game and Marty being, overseeing the entire offense, but clearly focusing a little more closely on the passing game. I don't know. I mean, as you said, there are a lot of moving parts here. Maybe there isn't any interest in Greg Roman as an offensive coordinator elsewhere, but that's something I could foresee the Ravens having to make a decision on, whether it's, okay, you either lose Roman and you're back to having the running game that you potentially had a year ago under Morningwig, which wasn't good and wasn't enough of a commitment to that, or do you make a change there, keep Greg Roman, but then you have to take a look at your passing game. And I think they need to look at their passing game regardless. I think as much as I didn't agree with keeping Morningwig a year ago, I really disagreed with the thought of them not hiring another quarterback's coach, another set of eyes to work with Joe Flacco.
Boy, there's been so many of them, though, right? I mean, when you start to go backwards through the Caldwells and the Zorns and the Cam Camerons and the Hugh Jacksons, I mean, it's unbelievable how many sets of opinions Flacco has not just solicited once or twice like a John Gruden sit-down on the back of the bus. I'm talking about somebody you went to school with, for years at a time, new professors in the classroom, which is really what the setting is. I don't know that the fans really have an appreciation for this being another year of college, right? And literally a new teacher in the front of the classroom. That's That's what the NFL is, and this is the time of the year where all of these things. John Gruden's going to come back and coach football, right? I mean, who's his OC going to be? Who's his DC going to be? What is, this is the Vermeil coming back thing again, and how much the league changes. And Billick talks about it all the time, how much the game's changed in the 10 years he's been out of the game. For how these teams run and how they operate. And you look on these sidelines now of these college teams, and all the coaches look like they're 35 years old. It's a different world out there right now, and from an offensive standpoint as to what fixes things, the whole league has issues on offensive linemen and blocking and technique and running the ball. Like, I don't know that there are any offensive geniuses out there, maybe in the way that Mike Martz was thought to be at one point, right?
Yeah, and that's a fair point. And to the point that you made, as far as if you bring in another quarterbacks coach, if you make a change at offense coordinator, there is something to be said for continuity. But that said, you want to make sure it's the right guy. You don't want to be going down the same road of not having a productive offense. And I think it's tough because you do look at what happened this year, and this is where I will stick up a bit for Marty Morningwig. As much as he still does things, still makes calls that make you scratch your head, including the Alex Collins tremendous touch, the run that at the time you kind of said, well, that might have saved.
Dude, that was 4th and 3. I mean, what the hell was that?
Right. But it worked because Alex Collins made plays, and that leads me to my next point. Regardless of who the offensive coordinator is, whether it's Marty coming back, whether it's Greg Roman, whether it's Greg or Gary Kubiak, whoever, this team needs more football players. This team needs more talent at the skill positions. This team on Sunday, with their season on the line after Chris Moore had been concussed and Michael Campanaro had turned his ankle on that final kick return, had Mike Wallace and a guy that just got promoted from the practice squad as their only 2 healthy wide receivers on the field. People keep talking, why did Joe Flacco throw to Ben Watson underneath on 4th down on that final play? And that's a fair point, but they had 2 receivers on the field on 4th and long. That's a problem. And yes, I know a lot of that was motivated by injury, but let's face it, this team doesn't have enough good wide receivers. Jeremy Maclin was a massive disappointment this year. I'm really wondering if he'll be back, even though he's under contract. Mike Wallace is going to be a free agent.
Can you say right now you could count on Jeremy Maclin to come back next year and be...
That's what I'm saying. I mean, he's under contract, but...
So's Perryman, right?
Well, Perryman is too, but he was a healthy scratch on Sunday. So my point is, they need to add more football players to the skill positions. They need a playmaking tight end. This group of tight ends, as well as they did blocking, as nice as Ben Watson was as a story coming back from the Achilles, they didn't make an impact in the passing game. He caught balls because because someone had to catch balls in the same way that Kamar Aiken caught a bunch of passes 2 years ago because there was no one else. They need to aim higher at the tight end position. Certainly need to address the wide receiver position. At wideout right now, there's one guy that I point to that I would safely assume is on the roster next year, and that's Chris Moore. And we're talking about a guy who is a number 3, number 4 receiver type who's a special team standout, not a number 1 receiver, not even a guy that should be entrusted to be a number 2 receiver at this point. He's a role player. And hey,
well, he would have been Kamar Aiken 2 years ago, right? Literally, right?
Yeah, I mean, you need those two. I'm not trying to knock Chris Moore, but they have a lot of work to do at those spots, and that's not even talking about what's going to happen on the offensive line. Ryan Jensen, as effective as he was, as much of a pleasant surprise as he was to kind of stabilize the middle of that offensive line, he's going to be a free agent, and you wonder, because he did play well enough and did get a little bit of recognition and love from sites like Pro Football Focus, you wonder what the market's going to be for him.
Yeah, somebody going to give him $4 million a year, right?
I mean, I don't think he's getting a lucrative contract in the Rick Wagner variety, but I don't think he's a guy that you're going to be able to sign for 2 years at $4 million. I think you're going to have to give him some real money if you want to keep him. What happens with Austin Howard? Are you confident with him for another year older, or do you look to improve there? I mean, good news is they're going to get Marshall Yanda back. The bad news is Marshall Yanda's a year older and coming off of a serious ankle injury.
And it's expensive.
Yeah, is he going to be the same great player? He's going to come back and play. There's no doubt about that. In fact, I saw him in the locker room on Monday. But is he going to be the best guard in football anymore? Alex Lewis should be good to go for the start of the offseason workout program in April. Talk to him on Monday. So they'll get some pieces back, but the offensive line, just like any other unit on your team, that's always an evolving unit, especially if they lose Greg Roman this offseason. If he takes an offensive coordinator job elsewhere and the Ravens don't want to make a change with Marty. So, there's a lot to this, and that's what's unsettling about the fact that the Ravens miss out on the playoffs with let's call it what it is, a really easy schedule this year. Yes, they had injuries. Yes, they had other things that worked against them, but the schedule part of it, you can't ask for anything more than what they got this year. And they went 9-7 and they missed out. And now you go into another off season. Once you establish what's going to happen from a front office standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, then you ask the question, how are we going to improve this roster? And there's a lot of work to do. And even on the defensive side of the ball, I think you still look at edge rusher, even though they have some young candidates, but until a Tim Williams really steps up, until you see more consistency from a couple of those young guys, I think that's still something you look at. I think you have to look at inside linebacker, that spot next to C.J. Mosley. I think Owasso was a really nice story, but I'm not convinced that he's your long-term solution in the way that Zach Orr looked like he was going to be that long-term solution before we found out about his neck issue. So, they still have some spots on the defensive side of the ball to look at. So, long story short, this team has a whole lot of work to do. And while I agree they're not in a position that a Cleveland Browns or the New York Giants or some of those teams are in right now, at the same time, those teams have top 5 picks, and the Ravens are picking 16th in the draft. So right off the bat, not to say you can't get a really good player at 16, but it does make it a little more difficult. So
I saw the kid from Georgia throwing it around, and I thought, maybe he'll be our next quarterback. And I thought, well, if he's any good, we're going to have to go 3-13 at some point to get him. Like literally, like, if that's the right guy, I don't, kid's a freshman. I don't know, but I'm just throwing it around, looking out for the next quarterback, and thinking to myself, well, you better hope you don't see what 2-14 looks like around here, because I saw what 9-6 looked like over the weekend. It didn't look good, and I think at the top of all of this, and we'll get back onto the field, I just think the owner has to have thoughts that he's never had before, because I have thoughts I've never had before about my business in sports and the city in general and sports in general and these two franchises in general and the amount of money and the amount of people and the amount of population and the amount of, where is this going 5 or 10 years from now if I own the Ravens and 9-6 has me that in 2017? I don't know where the bar is going to be, but I know that Bisciotti, thinking big picture, a lot of this is going to be, I have to have people in the stadium. We have to have people here, and the only way to do that is going to be to win. I think they've realized that. And and again, you talk about DeCosta sticking around, and he's been here forever, and I know I love Eric. I think our relationship's kind of famously lengthy through a couple of decades now. But there has to be a point that if you're taking the gig here, that the empty stadium has to be in the back of your mind of, what's the owner really need me to do here? You know what I mean? Like, I think if you take the Buffalo Bills job, you realize if you get to be a wild card team and you get in, they wait for you at the airport on a 5-degree night and they get excited about it. That's not the bar around here. It's a different place here at this point.
Yeah, and you'd say this, winning changes that, and winning does spoil people. And look, Ravens fans are spoiled, and anyone listening to this, probably there's going to be a few people that get ticked off hearing that, but they are. But at the same time, this has gone on long enough now where you've missed the playoffs 4 out of 5 years. I don't think you can just chalk up all the disenchantment to fans being spoiled. There's some legitimacy to that now, because you used to be not on the same level as New England, but close. Right?
But this organization never worried that if they went 6-10, they'd stop selling tickets and people would stop coming. You know what I mean? They had a press conference 15 years ago where Billick stepped up and said, "Hey, we won a Super Bowl. This is our rebuilding year." Certainly the Orioles are have dabbled in that rebuilding thing, and the Astros and baseball, it's perceived to be different. But can you imagine if Bisciotti came out now and said, look, let's be realistic here. We got a quarterback that's 33 with a bad back. We've got an edge rusher who's 35 who, exceeded everything. We've had a general manager who's been here 22 years. We've got a safety who's 30-something now, is on his second legs from San Diego. We're just going to, blow this thing up and build it back up around Brandon Williams and C.J. Mosley and, I don't know, Ryan Jensen and Ronnie Stanley. I'm making that up, right? There's no way the fan base here could withstand that. They have to win 11 games next year or else. That's where they are. Where the Orioles, we're laughing at who's going to be pitching for them. It's a different measurement, and I think the organizations have been run differently in that the Ravens have John Harbaugh has never had to worry, what if the people stop coming to the games? Will my boss be pissed off? Meanwhile, everybody in the building out there is worried about that right now.
Sure. The attendance factor is very realistic. And, to your point about blowing it up, I think it depends how that would look. Does that mean your Ozzie Newsome is in the same exact role, Eric DeCosta is in the same exact role, John Harbaugh is in the same exact role? What does that mean for Joe Flacco? We know Flacco's cap situation really makes that pretty much a non-starter until a year from now. I also
think you're hard-pressed to find a better quarterback in 8 months from now and trot him out in September. As much as we defecate and urinate upon Flacco around here, they would have been 9-6 playing for a playoff spot with Tyrod Taylor or Ryan Mallett or fill in, anybody this side of Carson Wentz, right? I've seen what backup quarterbacks look like coming through here the last 8 weeks. I don't want Jacoby Brissett to be my quarterback. I don't want Ryan Mallett to be my quarterback. I don't want Andy Dalton to be my quarterback right now, although he's probably got 4 years on Flacco. So, as much as everybody wants to throw Flacco out, I would say pump the brakes on that for now.
Fair enough. I'll say this. They do need to draft a quarterback, and I'm not talking first round, but they need to start thinking about that. If for no other reason, he is going to be 33. He had an ACL injury 2 years ago. He missed all of training camp with a back issue this year. He's starting to break down a little bit, and that's not to say that I expect him to start missing games because he didn't. He played in all 16 games this year, even with the back issue being such a factor early on. But I think you do need to start thinking about the future and take a shot at if you find the next Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't a first-round pick. Take a shot if you're finding the next Russell Wilson or the next Dak Prescott. I'm talking, third, fourth round, somewhere like that. I think you do need to upgrade the backup quarterback position for that reason, for the reason of maybe you do find the guy that 3 years from now is ready to take over because you feel he's a better option than Joe Flacco at age 30.
Well, it is amazing. They let Ryan Mallett throw the ball around for a month right back in August, and we saw that. Had that been the next whomever, you'd have something to say. But, yeah, I would agree with you that we're going to talk about that for the next 3 months. You and I will be paying particular attention to those quarterbacks who are not in the top five. Right?
I don't think first round. I don't think that for one thing, that would really hinder this team's ability to try to get better for 2018 because, as you pointed out, they need to win. They're really in a unique position here because they do have all these decisions, that Steve Bisciotti is making over the course of this week as far as what happens with the front office, what happens with the coaching staff, assuming John Harbaugh returns, which that's what I expect at this point, but what happened on Sunday, it's one of those all bets are off kind of situations where you never know, and it really tests the mettle and the patience and the temperament of your owner when something like that happens, because that's the kind of loss that we talk about it all the time. That's a loss that costs people jobs, and it remains to be seen who exactly loses their job. I think we would have been having a long conversation about Dean Pease if he hadn't already leaked out his intention to retire prior to Sunday's game. So, it's going to be interesting in that regard. But I think, going back to Flacco, I think you do need to look at upgrading the backup quarterback spot with the younger guy, and I'm not talking about a Keith Wenning in the 7th round or not someone like that. I'm talking someone that could be someone you'd point to as a legitimate backup. And if Joe Flacco has health issues, if his play deteriorates further, and he reverts to what we saw in the first 10 games of this season, he played better down the stretch, which was good to see. I think it was a reflection of him being healthier, no question. But if he is back to being the guy that we saw early last season, or this past season, and doesn't look healthy and is looking older, then you'd like to have a younger guy that you can at least be talking about, so to speak, that can at least push him, that you could envision if you find the right guy, if you get really lucky, and a lot of that is luck. Seattle was lucky that they found Russell Wilson in, the 4th round. Dak Prescott being a day 3 pick. I mean, those teams aren't geniuses in the same way that New England wasn't a genius for taking Tom Brady late in the 2000 draft. There's luck involved. So, I think the Ravens are at a point now, and Joe Flacco's age, I think there's absolutely merit to them finally pulling the trigger on taking a quarterback late day 2 or early day 3 of the draft, and kind of looking at that as, hey, you've upgraded from Ryan Mallett. You're not going to be paying that guy a whole lot of money, and perhaps 2, 3, 4 years down the road, maybe that's the successor to Joe Flacco. But again, that's a big if. But I just think at this point, that's a conversation that probably should be had, and that's something that should be executed.
All right, there's no Owings Mills this week. Luke Jones will be on the scene for baseball soon enough. Pitchers and catchers reporting soon enough. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by DNL Window Tinting. 26 years now of tinting everything. Cars, boats, businesses, they put the shades on the sun. When the white stuff's coming down and the ice is out there, you get that glare going on. Winter is a perfect time to get your car tinted. Deli Ish over on Wise Avenue in Dundalk specializes in those fantastic Reubens and that lean corned beef. You can find out about their catering at delibaltimore.com or stop by Wise Avenue in Dundalk and visit Deli-ish. Also, our friend Lee Tessier and his team at Keller Williams, American Premier Realty, there for you here in 2018 to list your home. You risk nothing if you're in the market to sell, or if you're looking to buy and you need the right realtor, Lee Tessier is your guy. You want to go to leetessier.com. That's Tessier. You can find me out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper ships directly to your email inbox each and every morning. That's brought to you by Planet Fitness. 2018, get yourself in shape. It's $10 a month, $1 down, no commitment. Start the year right. Get yourself into a Planet Fitness where they're always judgment-free. Learn more and get some inspiration at planetoftriumphs.com. Last but never least, the WNST Tech Service is here for any breaking news. Whomever the defensive coordinator shall be, you'll get it first. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And, of course, Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home. It is the SSV on WNST. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I hope you've read my Ghost of Baltimore Football past, present, and future out on the web. I hope to be writing a little bit more here in 2018, as well as going to Super Bowl 52, I guess it is this year, and Ray Lewis going into the Hall of Fame this year. So we got a lot of things happening. Luke and I will be in Minnesota in a couple of weeks. But between now and then, we're going to be here keeping you abreast of everything going on with the Ravens, the Orioles, Terps, Caps, off-season, college football. We got stuff happening around here. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.